João, if you're ready, please come up on the stage. We welcome you. This is your first live presentation after leaving Unbabel. We're very excited you decided to side with us. Thank you for making it here, and let's begin.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Konstantin. Thanks for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about GenAI and the role in localization. But before, I think GenAI is something that we're all still kind of learning what it does and what to do with it. There's like immense potential that's still to be untapped, even with current models. Just to give an example, like yesterday, my hot water heater decided to stop working, and I was not happy to have a cold water shower. And so I went downstairs, and instead of actually looking for the manual, I just took a picture of the display, sent it to ChatGPT, and asked in Portuguese, how do I fix this? And it basically went to find the instructions and tell me which buttons to press and to actually solve my issue. And that was completely seamless. So this is where we are. So a little bit about me. So I did my PhD around almost 20 years ago in natural language processing. I started the Lisbon Machine Learning Summer School, which has been going for like 12 or 14 years. And 11 years ago, I started Unbabel. So I was a co-founder and CTO, and I've been there for 11 years. And I'm very proud of a lot of the work that we did at Unbabel into launching new technologies and new AI for localization. Besides that, I'm also like happily married. I'm a proud father of three amazing princesses, which is the three people I've been dedicating most of my time nowadays. And also like a wannabe surfer and paddle player. So I've been working hard to become better at those skills. And so what I want to talk to you a little bit is my views about the localization industry and the people that work in the localization industry. So I'm going to share a couple of examples and opinions, and hopefully we can have a conversation around those topics. So the first thing is, people saying that the localization industry is dead is happening for almost 10 years. I remember this news and this paper very well and what it meant for Unbabel and all the board members calling us. And we all know that this actually didn't happen. And so Neural MT did not kill translation or the localization industry. In fact, it has been growing ever since. But I think there is something different about GenAI. And this was a context that we did last year on September using Tower LLM, where basically we compared three very hard cases for translation using only AI and against the best humans that we had, like two humans flows. And the results were very similar when measured by MQ annotations. And I'm going to deep dive into this, but I think it's like we cannot ignore that these models are actually very, very good at translating. Basically, everything has to do with language. On the other hand, if you work on localization, you know that localization is much more than translation. So there's a lot of complexity of the interaction with the customer and a bunch of tasks that needs to be done besides the translation per se. So you can basically resume the localization industry to this particular task. And honestly, if you ask me, do I believe that all this complexity is going to basically become this? I don't. I don't think that customers will just interact with ChatGPT or Claude or any other tool and basically just solve the localization issue and be done. So there's still an industry, there's still a lot to be done. I am very curious about what's going to happen with agents, like what part of this, all the process that we have nowadays can be done by agents. I think it's a new area, so something to learn about. But I wanted to think a bit like that. I believe that the human work involved localization will change, but not disappear. I don't think we'll have as many people involved on the online translation or basically working for every single translation, but actually more adapting the systems. And I'm going to give some examples. And so I'm going to try to think about what's my role in the future if you're a project manager, a translator, a QA, a front file engineering. And I'll give a couple of examples. So I'll start with translation. So this was the competition we did last year. And there's a lot of things that can be debated about the process and so on, so bear with me. But what we told internally was, you can use whatever AI tools you want. There cannot be any human involvement during the translation. You can spend as much money as you want with AI model. And in fact, what we did was a reasoning model, so it was more expensive than just like a normal model. And there was a lot of constant prompts that I'm going to show you. And on the human side, it's like, okay, you can use whatever resources we have, the best linguists, everything. And this was kind of like the examples. We have like some literary texts, some technical texts, and some legal text. So it was not customer service or your easy to translate examples. And just to give an example, this is a third of a prompt for one of the examples. So there was information about the tone in the register, the philosophical terminology, the clarity and simplicity. So this was like a very large prompt, and it took a lot of work to be done. And again, this was done by linguists, not by AI people. And so basically there was a setup. So basically the types of text, the amount of words, a bunch of LPs, identical instructions, 2 weeks to set up the translation flows. And this went for both ways, for the AI, for the other one. And then at the end, we had linguists doing MQM annotations and doing blind evaluations. One of the things we realized, I think this is part that's going to fit on my narrative, is that MQM had to be adapted, and we didn't do this for this competition, but there's a PhD thesis with Unbabel working on this, just because you start getting to a level of quality that MQM does not capture all the nuances. So there is work on improving the annotation typologies. And so basically, my claim is that we might not need humans to translate, but we need humans to build the systems that translate. So we had people building the right prompt. We had to set up the proper evaluation cycle, which meant like prompt, try, evaluate, go back to the prompt. We need to basically define the finer grain typology, and we need to annotate a lot of data. And all of these basically are skills that are the same of the people working in the localization industry, just being used on a different way. So another example is transcreation. So this is an old problem that we had at Unbabel working on customer service, where basically you had an agent replying to a Japanese customer. The agent was not Japanese, and he would produce like a completely satisfactory answer from his point of view, but it was inappropriate from a cultural point of view. And there was a lot of reasons for this. And these were humans. This was not machine. These were humans answering. And ideally, what you want is for them to actually reply in a way that was appropriate. And so what we did with Unbabel was we created like extensive guidelines of how to properly address a Japanese customer. And we did this for a bunch of languages and a bunch of cultures. Now, what we were able to do is take this information, which again took a lot of domain expertise and linguistics, and basically transform it into a prompt and get the module that was doing this rephrasing automatically with high accuracy. Obviously, to evaluate this, we had to define a new typology to evaluate this rephrasing. So there was a lot of linguistic work involved on doing the typology and testing. And afterwards, we basically got the system working. So again, if you think about what we did, we had to build the right prompt, but for that, we had to set up the proper evaluation cycle. You had to define finer grained typologies. We had to annotate data. So basically, it's kind of like the same skill set applied to a new problem. And you can see where I'm going. So there's like all this like linguistic knowledge and knowledge that people from the localization industry have that is very useful for a wide range of tasks. I want to give a different example about terminology extraction. And this is very basic. So this is not something on production. This was something that I did this morning, just as an example to try with ChatGPT. So I asked him, can you look at Unbabel website and public assets and basically generate me a terminology, a glossary? And he came up with something like language operations, human in the loop, language converter, live chat translation. So I think you can definitely improve the prompt, but this took me like 3 or 4 minutes. And then I say, well, instead of Unbabel, what about Skyscanner? And he basically went there and got a bunch of information. And so this was kind of like ChatGPT, no extra work from an engineer or an AI person, not a linguist, in 2 or 3 minutes. So definitely there's something here that you can use. And I know there's a bunch of research papers on how to use LLMs to define terminology. So again, I think it's like the thing that people have to do right now is basically adopt GenAI, like set up your properly GenAI workspace that allows you to experiment. Spend time playing with the models. Like the models are really good. They have some small nuances. And then once you get something like a toy example working, like this one, which I don't claim it's working yet, basically now go to the formal process. Define how we're going to evaluate, gather data, and work on the experimentation loop. Another thing is about project management. And here I think it's a more interesting thing because if you look at the way that companies are working nowadays, although some of them have adopted GenAI or claim that they have adopted GenAI, they still work on the same way. So GenAI adoption means I'll replace my former NMT by my LLM MT, which is slightly better. I'll have some issues on putting the context and so on, but nothing really changes. But I do believe that there's going to be some changes. So I do believe that agentic workflows can bring a lot of value to the table. I don't know exactly what. I haven't seen, and that might be me, any good example of agentic workflows for localization. But I think there's two ways of thinking about this. One is you can replace every single box by an agent or an LLM or a mixture. Some boxes might still have humans to set up the evaluation frameworks and so on. Or you can think about an agent that actually interacts with the customer. And if you think like kind of the path that we've been following was, okay, we had this highly service industry, then a bunch of players tried to go more to self-service so that the customer could be faster on the interaction and faster, cheaper. But at the same time, you can now get the same quality of service with an agent at the same pace. So I think there's a lot of potential of rethinking what would be the interaction with the customer, and the entire platform has an agentic first AI platform. I'm not saying you don't need humans. I actually think you need humans to basically coach the agents and take care of the platform and observe and evaluate. But I think there's a lot of potential for new paradigms of interaction in the industry. So basically, what I would suggest is like start learning some no-code agentic frameworks, because I'm not saying that linguist translators should start coding, although it doesn't hurt. Start simple, like replace old flows with new flows. Think about missing agents where it can go. Basically, be the coach. And I think this is something we're going to see someone doing this year. I haven't seen it, but I think there's a lot of potential. So basically, just to close up and go to questions, I think what should we be doing in the next 5 years? I believe that AI is a solid choice for most tasks, so I don't think that we'll need the same amount of humans to do translations or to do terminology extraction. But there's a lot of work on setting up AI. So what's the right prompt? How do we evaluate this? What's the data? It's very interesting. I've been talking with a lot of companies, not from local industry, that are paying for like large AI programs. And most of the cases that don't have no way to evaluate what they're doing. Like, should I use Claude or ChatGPT? Should I train? Should I do RAG? Like, how are you evaluating it? They're not. They're just looking at one example at a time, which obviously doesn't work. And definitely like play with agentic workflows. There's a lot of stuff coming out, making it easier. I think that something interesting will come out from there. Um, just to finalize, I think your hard skills are still very important. They didn't disappear. You didn't become irrelevant. You just need to learn how to reuse your skills in the new world. Your skills are fundamental to a successful deployment. And on the other hand, if you think that GenAI is basically being adopted by most of the industries, I think you have the chances to use your skills that are going to be fundamental and be the language operations or the language of the rest of the world. Okay, and with that, I'm ready for questions.
You're so fast, Joao. It's incredible. We have 15 minutes for questions. This has never happened before in a keynote. And ladies
I
and
love
gentlemen,
questions.
yes, sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen how technical it can get and how we can quickly jump into the industry argot. This is a taste of what awaits in this conference. We're going to try to get as hands-on and as professional as possible right off the bat. Okay. To ask questions, please use QA function at the bottom. There is this button. You can submit your question. And it's also possible to upvote the questions so that if we get 30 or 40 questions, I can pick up the most upvoted ones so that we have a democratic process of selecting the question. While you are submitting your first questions, let me ask the first one. So you've seen a lot of the stuff going right now in a wider world of AI. You've seen also how many problems remain unsolved in a world of localization. What do you think are the top, maybe two most exciting problems that localization people should apply themselves to? Right, there's still a lot to do. What excites you? What keeps you up at night, or what do you think about when you surf and you switch off for a second and your mind wanders away?
Yeah. I think there's three topics in different areas. One is I'm very curious about what you can do with agentic workflows, agents. How can you solve like the broader localization? So gaming, video, there's a lot of things that used to be a lot of work. I mean, I still remember the days of like problems with file engineering, everything that takes time and work. How can we solve them? And do we have the right tools to actually address it? Because I think LLMs gave us like something magical that we didn't have before, which is like very good tools to kind of rewrite, summarize, and have a bunch of like information gathered. That is one side. On the other side is kind of think, okay, but what can people in the industry, especially linguists, do? Are they kind of like, are they going to move to deployment like people are afraid? And I think the answer is no. I think there's going to be a massive adoption of AI. I think enterprise to adopt AI will need data to validate what they're doing. And that data will need some linguistic knowledge. They might have to get some like domain knowledge from other areas, but I think there's a lot that linguists can do, and I think that's how they should position them. The third one, and I think it's the most interesting one that I don't have an answer, is change management. I think the problem of AI adoption right now, or a bigger AI adoption, is not a technology issue. We have the technology. It's people wanting to use the technology. And I know of a lot of examples, some of them I experienced, some of them I didn't, that people don't want to use the technology because it affects their personal job. So it's very hard for a company of 100 people to say, let's use GenAI and maybe we can do 10 times the work. And if there's not 10 times the work, maybe some people might leave. And to not touch on localization, I can use the example of coding. Like I had a very hard time of getting people adopting GenAI tools for coding because, people that are more senior think that it's a craft they have. How can GenAI be good enough? And what's going to happen is the people that start using it are going to become much more productive. And I think this change management that gets connected with the culture of the company is the hardest part to solve in the adoption of AI.
Fantastic. Let's start with the audience questions now. I can see a few questions that can be tied together. There's a beginner question. What is an agentic workflow? Although it could also be a loaded question. How do you understand the
I mean,
agentic?
I understand. I
And
understand.
just hold on. And the next question, which is a highly upvoted one, could you please show again the evaluation graphic and explain the need for the change in the MQM? I think
Okay,
this could be tied
so
together.
good question. So first, let's start with what do I think an agent is. I think an agent is a software program that you give them an objective, and he does the task that he needs to do to achieve the goal, which are not predefined. So if you basically set a workflow with 3 steps, for me, that's not an agent, that's a workflow. Now, the definition of agentic nowadays goes from everything, LLMs with tool use to what I just meant. I don't want to be picky. I mean, what I think about agency is having them solve tasks that they have to reason, they have to define a plan and execute each one of the tasks. And for each task, they can call tools like other LLMs. And that's why I consider agents. Some agents have a front facing, like a chatbot. And you can think about, should we have a chatbot interacting with the customer? And basically asking questions. It doesn't have to have that. It can be an agent that you just launch on the customer and go figure out all the places where the customer gets data from, and then basically say, okay, this is the connector that I need. I'm going to build a connector for each one of them, and suddenly you have the customer fully connected to your platform. It can be a lot of things. I think the MQM one, so while ask is like, reach me on an email. This was a PhD work that I have been part of, but I'm not by far the specialist, but I'm happy to make an intro. Otherwise, I probably won't know how to answer the questions, but I'm very happy to point you to the right person.
Yes. To tie this up, João, you teach a summer school in AI in Lisbon, right?
Well, I don't teach it. I organize it. Basically, the
You host it.
professors come from outside, but it's been going for 12 years. It's like in the morning there's a class of 4 hours. There's labs in the afternoon. There's a talk at night for 7 days. It's pretty cool, but I recommend for everyone.
Is there some surfing involved?
No, you can go to, but not in the summer school. Summer school is pretty intensive for work.
Okay. Next question, and I think this one was the one that I wanted to tie up with the presentation. Have you seen any success stories with automated language quality assessment processes, such as proofreader agents, comment scores, QE scores?
Mhm.
So, what's the actual story from the world? Is it working?
Yeah. I mean, so I might be a little bit biased. I think that for translation, quality estimation works very well up to 90 something MQM, which is at the same point that basically if you take 2 professional linguists to annotate the text, they also have a annotated disagreement. I think the challenge with QE, and I hope that someone is working on this right now, is it's a generic model, so you don't have a way. So the best QE that exists until recently of the competition was not an instruction-led LLM. So it was basically a discriminative system. And I think that you need to have something that you can pass instructions in LLM, and we're working on that, or we were working on that in Babel. where you can actually pass the specificities of the customer. Otherwise, if the customer wants to use something because it's their style guide, that is not the best linguistic choice, but it's his choice, there's no way that the model is going to tell that this is right or wrong. But definitely, I think that QE is a wonderful, like, I don't think that nowadays anyone should be sending a job to a customer without a QE stamp. Because at least when you pick something bad, you can be notified and you can go there and say, well, this is actually an error on QE, so feed it to whoever is doing that, or actually stop, I have an issue, let me fix it and send to the customer. So there's a reason. There's APIs, it's super cheap, it's or the same
In
to
other
like
words,
all,
we supplement all the QE processes we had before with Trados, Verifica, LexiQA, and tools like that. We add LLM QE now, but we don't need to always rely on it to publish content without human supervision, right? You're saying that unsupervised QE is maybe not the way to go.
No, I think it's a signal, and then at some point in time, depending on your risk as a profile, you might say, okay, if QE is very low, do I want to have a human looking at it or not? But definitely for most cases, like QE is measured against correlation with MQM annotations, and the correlation is very high. Sometimes if you have like a QE annotation and you have 4 annotators, and I ask, okay, which one is the QE versus which one are the humans, you cannot distinguish. So QE is very strong nowadays.
To follow up on this, there is a question from Silvio from eBay. Can you perhaps speak about how does this automated checking by a large language model compare with the human check? Is the evaluation from the model good? How far is it from a human evaluation?
Yeah, I think I touched a bit. So there's different types of scores. You can get like the sentence score, the document score, or you can get actually a prediction of the MQM labels. And all of those correlate very highly with human annotators. I don't know the exact numbers, but they're published. And so I think they're very reliable nowadays. Now, they still have some errors every once in a while, but they're so small, the same way that humans also have errors. I mean, we've been dealing with the annotator agreement in Unbabel for 10 years. So I think I'm not going to say it's exactly the same because I don't want to be unfair and I don't have the data, but it's very close. It's very reliable nowadays and it's getting better. So one thing, so just a note that somebody told me, which I think is very correct. You should always plan not with the AI of today, but with the AI of 1 or 2 years from now. And you've all been seeing how AI is moving. And one example, I remember like 2 years ago, I was talking with one of our investors, and he was talking about the company in the portfolio who was doing customer service. But they were using the original GPT-4, so basically it was more expensive to use what they were using than actually having a human. And people are like, oh, ha, ha, this is so stupid. Guess what? 2 years later, AI is like 1,000 times cheaper, with the models are even better, and so now that makes sense. So, don't think about I'm not going to implement this because nowadays it works like this. Think I'm going to implement this because it's going to take me time, and this is where it's going to be in 1 year or 2 years from now. Otherwise, you're going to miss the train.
Yeah. To jump on the train is very valuable right now. This is an excellent comment. There are two questions about scaling. So a question from Stavrula: how do you scale something so unpredictable like a large language model application and translation? Is there any trick to this? Is there something that localization folks need to know? And another question about scaling is how do you build those prompts and test the outcomes? How do you prompt engineer at scale?
Yeah. Okay, so two very good questions. So we've been running LLMs on production for translation for at least 2 years. And I think that it's the same checks we had on Neural MT, 6 years ago. Basically, we have QE, we have some hard checks on completely broken hallucinations, like it doesn't generate anything. And we basically keep annotating data and checking. But with the right prompt, and that's the second part of the answer, those things are very scalable. I don't think like the fear that it will hallucinate, like it doesn't happen. And also, you have to think about like translation is a much easier problem than like say summarization or generation, because you also have a reference that you want to copy. So you're basically just copying something in a different language. So it's much easier than the other one. In terms of a prompt, so I think that everyone should have a nice setting to do this. And this doesn't apply just to GenAI. We had this for AI since ever, which is you have something where you can go and write your prompt or your code in a source example, and you see the output. That's what I call you use it for intuition. So you go there, you put some examples that are hard, you test it, you change some stuff. But then you also need to have test sets that you build that basically whenever you have something new, then you run over the entire test set. Because you don't want to fix on one particular example that you care a lot and basically break it to 20 others. And so you run it and you see what's the performance compared with the previous one. And if it's not better, then don't go. And even if it's better, where did it fail, and go check and go take a look. The other part is once you run this on production and you detect errors, pick those and add to a new test set. So you keep adding test sets with all the errors that you see before, and you try to fix them. This is the best way to guarantee that whatever you're doing now is not going to break what you did in the past. And it might change. For instance, you might try to train your model to like be better at a particular domain. And by doing that, you might be better at that domain, but kind of break something else. If you don't have this coverage of test sets, you won't be able to know it. But this for me is kind of like a ML hygiene. It's the same thing of ML ops. Just keep doing that.
Wow, that's a very information-packed answer. In 1 minute, we could hear a lot. We have about 4 minutes more. I think I can take three more questions. João, how are you feeling? Are you ready for three more
That's
questions?
all good. I'm standing, so I have more energy.
Understand. That's an old trick, but it works every time for me. I hope it's a comfortable position for you. Jessica asks whether an organization always needs to train a model or just prompting is enough. The models they change so often. Tying up to one model may be cool, maybe not cool. You have all the company data on one hand, and you can have your own model. On the other hand, you can always chase the next AI thing. What
Yeah.
is your opinion? What's best?
So I think there's no one answer. There's a process that you should follow. First of all, models are changing very fast and becoming much better. So first step is, again, define your test set. Know how to evaluate good from bad. The second one is play with prompts and play with RAG. So basically use your previous text as context for the translation, and that will take you some time. If this basically takes you the performance that you want, then you're done. You don't need to do anything else. And that can take you very far away, especially with new models. Now, the prompt, like I showed you, can be very complex. When I'm talking about prompts, I'm not saying, hey, translate X from Y to B. No, that's not how it works. It's like, there's a lot of information, style guide. So there's a lot of work on there. And you only know if it works if you have the proper evaluation setup. After that, if you still cannot do it because, let's say, you work on a particular domain that the model has not seen that kind of information on the training data, which by nowadays is almost impossible, then it might make sense to train. I mean, I can tell like Tower LLM was trained. It became better than the other models. Now, is this recipe forever? We'll see because the models are getting better. Is there value to use your own data? There is, but there's also a cost. It's the question is like, is this delta something that you need, that you value? But the first point is like, before you get to that, you have to basically take the other two, prompting and RAG, and then only think about post-training. Training from scratch, honestly, I don't think nowadays makes sense. Only for educational purposes.
Well, you trained from almost from scratch. Oh, you trained from scratch at when you built the Tower LLM, and it won the competition WMT in
So
November.
more or less, so Tower LM was not in from scratch. It
Not
was
from scratch.
training on top of a model, and that recipe, I think it still works, and people should do it if they have the need. I think we did LM from scratch, and the model is very good. It's competitive with Mistral for all European languages. It's very costly. We did it as part of an European project. So you must have very deep pockets to go into that thing. And the problem is like you spend a lot of money, and in 6 months there's a new model that comes that just like kills this. While the post training is much cheaper and is actually fine-tuning the model for what you need. I mean, and there's more stuff. I'm not saying that you shouldn't work on the model, but only if you have a specific need that justifies it. You might want to build a translation system that runs on device, and then you need a much smaller model, and there's a lot of tricks that you can do for that. Then yes, then go do that. But always has post training, never has like the pre-training part. But I think that depends a lot on like your goals and yeah.
Thank you. Last question, and let's have a short answer because it's a long question. I'll amalgamate two questions together. Where do you see the best application area? Somebody's asking whether LLMs, some LLMs are better suited for translation, and there's another question is, can we apply it in game localization? Is it good enough for us? Maybe there are other questions like, can it be applied to medical, legal? Is there a particular area where models are better? And perhaps, how do we know?
Well, I think they're very good for all the areas. You might have to change the prompts. I think gaming is something that I would love to work because you have the different characters, which are different prompts, and I guess you can just basically build a prompt for every character so that the translation becomes with your voice. How do you know it's, what I've been saying for now half an hour? Get an evaluation set. Every time you run something, look at the result. Like you said in the introduction, you have to be scientific about this.
Okay, next.
João, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Well on time, many questions answered, and hopefully you will stay with us a little bit longer. There are many more questions to you, which are left unanswered. Everyone, you have a chance to ask one of the brightest minds in localization, GenAI, today. He is with you for how long, João? Another 30 minutes, 20 minutes? Look at the number of likes and the hearts flowing for you.
Thank you.